Hi, my name's Rose and welcome to my podcast, An Inside Job. This is a podcast where I share my journey with you and some valuable aha moments that I have learned along the way. I'm the author of An Inside Job, a practical guide to finding your true self. I'm a life changer and a mentor, helping you to see your way through to freedom. A special thank you to my Patreons that support me in creating and producing this podcast. I'd love it if you can support me at patreon.com/Rose Monaco. This is a special guest episode where I share with you someone that has influenced my journey and taught me something valuable to help me see life with more clarity. Remember, when you're willing to change, the teacher always appears. Your life is an inside job after all. No one can do this for you but you. So are you ready? Soul realignments, dimensions, evolving as a human. I am so fascinated now since meeting the beautiful Carla Savannah. The Akashic Records is like Google for the soul, an informative superhighway that contains all past, present, and future life information about one soul. Amazing, isn't it? Today I'll be speaking to Carla Savannah, a soul realignment practitioner with a vast knowledge in all things dimensional. Carla's also an author with books such as Evolve Your Emotions, Evolve Through the Dimensions, 21st Century Relationships, and she's well known for her book, How Do I Know When I'm Ready to Have Kids? Carla's passion in her work gives her clients some big aha moments and helps them to transform into their true potential. Welcome to An Inside Job, and I'm your host, Rose. Let's get into this informative conversation with the amazing Carla. Welcome, Carla, and good morning, and thank you for joining me today on my podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
So, because a lot of people don't know who you are, Carla, tell us just a little bit about you.
Let's see if I can make a long story very, very, very short. So many, many, many years ago, once upon a time, I was always very interested in spirituality because from a very young age, I used to have some pretty interesting experiences with paranormal activity. And as I grew older, being part of a very, very religious Catholic primary school and high school, they have very strict sort of beliefs and ideas about the world. And I remember once actually being at the back of a church, and I remember watching everyone stand up, sit down, kneel down, stand up. And I saw everyone doing this very robotic sort of movement. And I thought, what does this have to do with God or spirituality? Like, maybe it's something to do with patterns. So anyway, as I kind of grew older, I got very interested in the psychological aspects of things, having a very sort of challenging upbringing. I was attracted to the psychology of life. In essence, I studied psychology, but then I got pregnant halfway through university. I wasn't able to continue that, but I did go on to do my counseling diploma. And around the same sort of time, I also did Reiki. Now, this is interesting. So when I was doing psychology, everyone at university teaches you spirituality doesn't exist. It's been debunked. You can't mix spirituality in with any kind of psychology. It's science and that's it. So that was that part of things. And then when I did Reiki, they were basically saying to me, no, you can't mix counseling with your Reiki. It's either purely spiritual or it's purely counseling. You can't mix the two. And this was like 20 something years ago. And all I thought was, you watch, one day I'm going to find a way to mix counseling with spirituality. Okay. And that was like a passion for me for a long time. So I think in essence, at least for the past 25 to 30 years, that has been my desire, is to somehow connect science and spirituality at the same time.
That's very interesting you say that, because I can't see why we couldn't blend it together.
I know, right? I mean, you look at it these days, and there are so many people that are mixing all sorts of therapies.
They are.
They're mixing everything, like energy work with crystal healing, with counseling, with psychology. And there's so many psychologists out there who've actually, got a degree in psychology that are doing spiritual work. So why not?
Exactly. The one thing that really has always interested me was your soul realignments. And I had always been told about soul realignments, and it came at a right time for me. I have had soul realignments with you. I remember when I was actually at my tarot retreat that girls were talking about soul realignments, and I'm thinking, what is that? But my instinct straight away said, you need to look into this. So I thought, well, I will,
Yeah.
And for me, it was a big eye opener. So for our listeners, tell us a little bit about what soul realignments are.
Okay. So soul realignment in itself is actually a modality created by Andrea Hess. So in order to become a soul realignment practitioner, you have to study through her. The thing about Andrea, she's an amazing teacher, by the way. Andrea really teaches you that when she gives you all this information within soul realignment, she wants you to make it your own. So while I am a soul realignment practitioner and I can mix it with my counseling background, the realignments that I've created, which now I call Carla's realignments, they've kind of been modified and fine-tuned by me. So the way I do soul realignment in general is probably very different to the average practitioner who's got the certification like me. The idea about soul realignment is that you tap into the Akashic records, which is basically where your higher self resides. Some people call it Google for the soul. It really is like an information superhighway. So you're tapping into a person's book of life, in essence, and by having a look at what they've done in previous lives or what they're doing in parallel lives, you can pretty much determine certain patterns that they might still be running in this lifetime. So in essence, what I do within a soul realignment is the first part of it is I channel who a person is at a soul level. So I check out their blueprint, what their primary gifts are, what planet they came from, what their specializations are. I check, their consciousness levels to see if they're actually able to process what I'm going to be saying to them in a soul realignment. And if I notice that their conscious levels are slightly a little bit lower, I know I have to explain it slightly different. Or if they are on par with their spiritual journey, I know I can talk a little bit more about esoteric matters, like, for example, parallel lives and all that kind of stuff, and extraterrestrial beings or something like that. But in essence, yeah, so I'm finding out who a person is at soul level, first of all. And then I have a look at certain blocks and restrictions that might be stopping them from creating the life they desire. And after going through those blocks and restrictions, what I do is I try to uncover what happened in those previous lifetimes to have created those blocks and restrictions. I'll give you an example. So if I find that if someone has a vow of poverty as a block, for example, so if they have a vow of poverty, they might have a tendency towards this lifetime constantly having this belief system that they can't have money because it's unspiritual to have too much money, or every time they get a lump sum of money, all of a sudden the money just dwindles out of their account, or they don't attract money in general. So once we've uncovered the story of what happened to create that vow of poverty, then I give them a set of action steps, and these are very particular to them to try and help remove this. Plus they get a set of clearings as well to help remove this vow of poverty. And in essence, the idea is that when you're bringing that knowledge to the surface, you start to understand why you're doing the things that you're doing. You're removing this so that you can go on and start creating a life of more abundance rather than that poverty mentality. So in essence, that's kind of what it's trying to tackle. Finding out who you are, removing these blocks so that you can actually go on and live the life that you desire to live.
So interesting. I found that the soul realignment helped me see my patterns a lot clearer. It really helped me. Why do you think this type of reading would be beneficial for people?
So the idea is that if we're looking into people's patterns and the regular programs that people are running, the idea is that basically by coming to observation and witnessing and awareness of these patterns, simply by virtue of actually, the observer effect, where you're actually observing yourself and becoming aware of the patterns, you have the capacity to actually change them. I think within the soul realignment in general, it kind of allows me to address very intense and deep topics that you don't talk about with passing strangers, for example. And when I'm going into someone's Akashic records, in essence, they become kind of vulnerable to me. And I really have to acknowledge that too. Like, I have to respect that. Because when I'm going into their Akashic records, I can see really confronting patterns. I can see when people have had violent upbringings or abusive upbringings, or anything to do with sexual abuse, or like, we're talking really, really deep sort of sensitive topics that you don't talk about unless you've had quite a few counseling sessions. Whereas as soon as I go into their records, I see everything, which can kind of be a bit scary for them. But at the same time, it kind of allows me to go really deep, really quickly, and it helps them to become aware and address certain topics and issues that they would generally take a really long time to open up to. And that's one of the things that I like about it, because I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I like to see results. If I don't see results and I don't see outcomes and changes, then it's like it just doesn't work for me. I'm not one of those people that believes in extreme long-term counseling, and I want to be able to give people the tools so that they can go about and live their own life. I don't want them to be reliant on me. I don't want them to be constantly having to book appointments with me. Not that I complain about that, it's always extra for me, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that's not my goal. My goal is to give people the tools that they need so that they don't have to rely on me. And when you're going into soul realignments, you're going so deep into a person's soul, they've got nowhere to hide. So I can be very confronting sometimes with the way I say things. If anyone is looking for a very woo-woo, soft, fluffy sort of teacher, it's not me. Yeah, it's definitely not me, because I'm very, very authentic, and I'm always down the line, no BS kind of person. If you want massive changes and you want transformation, then come and contact me. But if you're looking for someone who's just going to pat you on the back and comfort you and say, you know what, it's not your fault, it's everyone else's fault, that's not me.
Once you do the realignments, then you give us 21-day clearings to do after it. So it's not just, here's your realignment and see you later.
Yeah. And that's another thing that really attracted me to studying the realignments in general. And that's why I continued my studies with Andrea. A lot of practitioners just do the level 1 and, they might stay at that. But I went all the way through. Like, I even did the apprenticeship program with her. I did all of the levels, very, very intense sort of work. And like I said, she's amazing. She's also a very no BS kind of person. But what I loved was that it's not just uncovering all this stuff and bringing all this stuff to the surface. You're actually getting tools to be able to fix them and clear them. And I find that a lot of people sometimes are scared to book the soul realignment because they just think, oh my God, why would I want to know any of these blocks? Or how can I fix half of this stuff? And that's just going to make me feel depressed and all of that. But straight away, I put a lot of the information back in their court, and I give them the tools that they need to be able to get over this, or over these blocks and restrictions, and change these patterns. So it's not like they're just getting one big recipe of disaster. They are getting the tools that they need to create long-term changes in their lives. So that's what I actually really, really love about it, is it just doesn't leave you there in that limbo. It really helps you shift the patterns.
When you give people the information, initially it can be quite confronting, especially if you know subconsciously about all the blockages and all the sabotaging that you're doing. But then all of a sudden, when it's highlighted, you've got to do something about it.
Yeah. And I mean, no one wants to find out that they were a murderer in a previous lifetime or anything like that.
I was so glad I wasn't. But the thing is, like, I found really interesting when I found out I was a blueprint designer.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
But then when I thought about it, and I actually did read a little bit more about it because I wanted to know what it was. I thought, what is that? I do like to create things, and I like to see how things work. And I think that's where in my job, I give people tools, and I like to watch them as they put the tools into place. Am I creating a good model here? Is this working? And I thought, oh yeah, because that kind of fits the blueprint designer.
Yeah. Because obviously that designer is designed to design.
Yeah.
And then if one of your specializations, which is that structured part of things where you like to have well-functioning systems and structured systems, see, this is the part that's so good about the soul realignment. Once you know who you are at soul level and basically what you're great at and what you're designed to do, all you're doing is just accumulating all this creator energy, and creator energy can only be used for creation.
Yeah.
Obviously. And that's the kind of energy you want to be tapping into. And that's why people teach you meditation and getting into the flow state and go into your happy place. All of that is about trying to get you to accumulate more creator energy so that you can go and utilize that creator energy to manifest more of the life that you want. But if you're trying to tap into a source that's really not you, like, for example, even doing these podcasts, you're great at talking to people. You're amazing at bringing people in and talking about themselves and that sort of connection. Because you're designed to actually do that, you're going to succeed in that. But then if someone told you, okay, for example, I don't know, that you had to become a bodybuilder, for example, which, there are people
no.
so there are some people in their realignments that are actually designed to be physical manifestors, and they're designed for that physical body structured system. So if you were going to keep trying to be a bodybuilder, I'm just going to go to you, hey Rose, you're not really in alignment with yourself. You're not really aligned to what your soul's gifts are. So if you continue to do this, you're not going to really create abundant situations for yourself. Whereas if you start moving more in towards these gifts and these talents that are actually who you are at soul level, guess what? Abundance is going to come to you like easily without issues at all.
And that's the interesting part with the alignment, because my creator side is right out there, but I am happy in that place.
Yeah.
I know you brought up the bodybuilder. If you're doing something that's not meant to be for you, you feel like you're working really, really hard towards something, but it just makes you feel like you don't like it.
Yeah, it's totally against the grain. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't believe in getting out of your comfort zone, because obviously that's important for growth as well. But something I actually mentioned in one of my books, Evolve Your Emotions, Evolve Through the Dimensions, I actually mention what real resistance is and what false resistance is. And there's a big difference. When you're venturing outside of your comfort zone and it's actually in alignment to who you are, you get a completely different feedback from the universe to what you would get if you were reaching out of your comfort zone and it's actually completely misaligned to who you are. The outcomes are very different. So in that book, I actually kind of teach what to look out for to figure out whether you are actually acting in alignment with who you are at soul level, or whether the resistance is actually real and you're doing something that's completely different to who you are.
Yeah. And when you are aligned to who you are, the universe does just open up and like encourage you, like, yes.
Yeah.
I found that with tarot. When I created the tarot, all of a sudden, it's like the universe opened and said, now you are in alignment.
Your creation, and and that's who you are at soul level. And then you grounded it at a physical level. The universe is like, hey, check it out. This woman is doing what she's aligned to do. Let's give her more opportunities to keep doing, what she's supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I love that. Now, I've heard you talk many times, and you just mentioned about dimensions.
I'll go through the 3 basic ones that we kind of work within on a daily basis. The 3rd dimension is all about physical reality. So it's everything that you physically can touch. It's the material world. Then there's the world of 4D. And I do try to touch upon it as with an emotional perspective, if that makes sense. The 4th dimension is all about feelings, emotions. So it's actually governed by the endocrine system. So I try to explain it as it's like the vibrational swimming pool that we are all swimming in. And I often joke around, if you were next to someone in the pool, you can kind of feel their vibration, and God forbid they pee next to you. Then you actually, that they're there. So, 4th dimensionally, technically, we can actually feel each other's frequency. We can feel the heat coming from each other's bodies. So we're all swimming in each other's 4th dimensional vibrational soup.
Yeah.
And that's where all the clairs kind of come in, the clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, all of that part of things sort of comes in. Then there's the world of 5D, the fifth dimension. And that world is purely data, purely information, okay? There's very little sort of emotion that's actually too much associated to it. The emotions aren't as dense because they're not as connected to our physical body as the 4D. So technically the 4D is the bridge or the connecting force between our 3D physical body and our 5D spiritual body. So when we die, we first shed our physical body, then we move on to 4D, then our job is to shed our 4D emotional body, and then we move on to 5D spirit realm.
Yeah.
3D is governed by doing, so it's physical action steps. 4D is governed by emotions and feelings. 5D is the thinking mind, higher self, that part of processing mind. So I talk a lot about think, feel, do, feel, think, all of those kind of, mixtures. So what you want to do is constantly get those aligned. Why that's important is because you can be thinking happy thoughts, but if you're not physically doing something that makes you feel happy and you're not feeling happy, guess what? They're all out of alignment.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting to feel happy, you want to think happy thoughts, feel happy emotions, and do things that make you happy. The thinking, the feeling, the doing, you want to get them all in alignment. And that's why I kind of go into it in a very simple sort of way there. That's the idea of it, is once we get those all aligned, technically you can manifest anything that you want. And I mean, Soul Realignment tries to actually do that.
So how many dimensions are there?
Well, within the field of science and quantum physics, as far as I know, they have proof of at least 10 dimensions, but I focus on the first 8 dimensions simply because they can be better understood from a human perspective. And by the time we get to the 8th dimension, there really is very little difference or separation between energy. So really by the time you achieve the 8th dimension, or that kind of emotion and thinking of the 8th dimension, everything is just one big common energy. And basically you're a part of source again, really. There's not really much division there.
Well, that sounds awesome to be there.
I wouldn't know, I have to say. The idea is that by the time you've reached that kind of mentality and thinking and energy, you're no longer in a physical body anymore.
No.
By the time you get to that 7th dimensional part of things, you're really tapped in and you can seriously just choose to leave your body. So
I think mine was 5.6.
I think I'm higher than that, but that was a while ago. With absolute reassurance, can say you're well over 6 now.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what that means, but we will just go with that. 6 is a nice number.
If I go further, I think everyone's going to become a little bit too confused.
Yeah, no.
So I'm going to leave that. But if people want to know more, definitely tap into my other books, the Dimensions book and the 21st Century Relationships book.
That's a good way of learning all about the dimensions.
From my perspective anyway, you know what? I love writing. I'm halfway through my 5th book at the moment, which is going to be the book 2 of 21st Century Relationships. Now that one's going to be an interesting one because that one is all about how humans weren't designed to be married. So that one's going to be an interesting one. I'm definitely going to challenge a couple of people's perspectives. And it's not that I'm against marriage. Like, don't get me wrong on that one. I am married and I'm very happily married and I adore my husband. But I find that in general, as growing up, I don't think we're given the tools that we need or the knowledge that we need in order to create good, long-lasting marriages. And if we're still so immature in that field, or in the field of actually getting to know ourselves first, how can we even consider trying to share our lives with another human when we don't even know ourselves first? In essence, that's obviously one of the topics that I kind of address within the new book. But yeah, the idea is that I really want people to kind of grow up a little bit more first before they even consider getting into marriage. I love writing my books. And I love doing the one-on-one work with people. I love the realignments. And just recently, I've just created a new therapy that's my own. I'm in the teething sort of parts of that one. And this one's going to be called 8 Cells Therapy. And that is my passion right now. Ultimately, I love that one-on-one and I love writing and I love talking to people. That's my desire. I don't aspire to want to talk in front of millions of people or any of that kind of stuff. I have to be able to reach my clients and have that connection, that one-on-one connection, and be able to help them and guide them and support them through their lives. So I really enjoy what I'm doing at the moment, and I want to move more towards the writing, and I'm really enjoying audios at the moment as well.
They're great.
Started doing the audios on Patreon, on my Patreon account. So I'm really enjoying giving those little pills.
That's what I love about Patreon. Both of us have moved over to Patreon,
Yeah.
which is a really awesome creator platform. You know your people, they know you. It's a closed circle.
Yeah.
It does have a subscription, but these days, what doesn't have a subscription? We support each other. We love what we do. And I clearly see that you love what you do. And I think that's why we connect so well. We love to have our Patreons and our followers that continue to support us as we create constant content to help our listeners.
One of my intention is for people to understand themselves. That's like my biggest thing, because being brought up the way I was and being an immigrant and all that kind of stuff, that's a really big thing for me, is because I wasn't understood, and because I desired to be understood, I had to find other ways to express myself. And ultimately, because we are creators, we are designed to express ourselves. And I feel like a lot of people are being very suppressed and very withholding of their true self.
Yeah, finding your true self is really, really important.
Because in essence, if you find your true self and you know who you are at a soul level, and you express who you are at a soul level, technically a happy and self-fulfilled person doesn't feel the need to go and step on other people's toes. It doesn't feel the need to go and control and take from other people. That's a self-fulfilled person. They don't need to take from another person. So that's a really, really big thing for me, is coming to understanding of who you are, how you express yourself, what gives you joy. So it really is about self-understanding.
Oh, totally. Until I found the true me and that center, that actually helped me find that peaceful place.
And once you get that peaceful place inside you, you don't seek it outside of you anymore, because you got it. That spark is there, and you know that no matter what happens, the world could be tumbling down around you.
Yes.
You've got that ability to tap back into that special part within yourself. It's an infinite resource. Yeah. Whereas sucking energy from others is a finite resource, because people only have so much that they can give until eventually they run out. But when you tap into the source of your, within yourself, that is an abundant resource, it's completely different, because it's infinite. It'll never be taken away from you.
Exactly. Because once you find you, no one can take you away again, if that makes sense. Totally understand that. That definitely aligns with me. That's what I think. By the time I met you, I'd already written my book. And I'd already found my true self, but I didn't realize until I had the soul realignment that we don't just find ourselves, we then find more and more aspects of us. So we become clearer and clearer. So that's what the soul realignment did for me.
The fact that you know who you are, but then when you start expressing, that's when the fine tuning starts to occur. You start going, oh, that didn't work. Oh, that didn't work. Guess what? That really, really worked. Okay, bang. Okay, now I'm on the right track, and then you do more of that, and then more, and then it's fine tuning again. So it's not just about, just that aspect of selves. It really is that, tuning in. And sometimes it can just be the tiniest little turn of the lever, one side or the other side kind of a thing, like on a radio, you're just turning it just that tiny little degree more or less. And once you get that frequency, you're like, bang, we're like, we're on par.
That's it. I think that once you find that, you actually then start to grow that part of you. How I see it is, you find it in the dark. There it is. You pick it up. Then that part of you starts to grow more and more. Instead of being locked away, it's been released, it's free, and it starts to learn what it's like to live in this world instead of being hidden and trapped somewhere else.
So that's like the level 2, the soul realignment 2, or Carla's realignment 2. I can't say it's soul realignment 2 because it's slightly different to the way she teaches it. So I've done it my own way, but that's the level 2. You start going into that darkness. You really start to go into deep shadow work. And when you start to integrate those darker aspects of yourself, you start to come into total acceptance of who you are at a soul level. You're not just accepting half of who you are, which is all the good traits and good qualities that you were taught to show the world. Now it has to be, okay, look, I've got all these amazing traits, but guess what? I've actually got all these really scary, vulnerable, negative, dark traits as well. And guess what? When you start getting into level 3 realignment, that's when you're bringing them all together. You integrate all aspects of yourself. And that's where I do that little meditation where I take you up to meet your spirit parents and you get a big healing. And I say straight away, you can't do the level 3 until you've integrated all this dark aspects of self, because we want you to take the wholeness and the complete part of yourself up there to get fully accepted, acknowledged, heard, and healed. You can't just take all the beautiful aspects of yourself to source. You want to take all the light, the dark, the everything.
I loved the 3.
Yeah, it's
absolutely love the 3.
You just feel like you're vibrating. All the cells in your body are vibrating. You can just feel the light. It's that completeness and wholeness again. It's such a good feeling.
Whilst I'm here, I might as well ask, because I actually am curious. Is there then a level 4?
There is a level 4. Mind you, I'm fine-tuning at the moment because I've created the new therapy, which is my own therapy, which is called 8 Cells Therapy. And the job of the 8 Cells Therapy is to actually integrate all of these aspects of self. And I teach people how to meet the needs of those inner aspects of self. The idea is that 8 Cells Therapy is probably going to be taking over most of those higher realignments that I created. I've already removed 6 and 7 because the 8 Cells Therapy definitely already tackles that. And I'm just trying to create it in a way where possibly the level 5 won't be needed as well, or I can integrate 4 and 5 into one realignment, and then it will be. But mind you, 8 Cells Therapy is something that anyone can do at any time. It's not like you have to have a realignment first and then do 8 Cells Therapy. They're two completely different things. So you can have the 8 Cells Therapy at any time. And because it is so flexible, anyone can do it. Whereas within the soul realignments, as you know, I don't do soul realignments for everyone. There's very specific blocks and restrictions that show up in a person's soul, or maybe sometimes their soul just isn't ready to do the soul realignment work. So as you know, I really often turn a lot of people down, and that's where it's different. With the 8 Cells Therapy, I can do it with anyone, whereas with the soul realignments, I need to very much check for these specific blocks and restrictions first before I agree to do any soul realignment for anyone.
Just question with that. I know that you have to be selective with people. Do you have an age also?
The soul realignments, yes. The idea is that in order to do a soul realignment, because it is a lot of transformational work, the person who is paying for and agreeing to the soul realignment needs to have full responsibility over their choices and their actions, plus obviously their financial state as well. Anything under 18 years old, I would recommend doing like a parent-child realignment. Or if I do a realignment for that person, it's the parent who's responsible for that person to do the realignment for them, or they're the ones that have to pay. They're the ones who have to do the clearings. They're the ones who have to help the child change because they've got a certain amount of control over their teenager, for example, or their child. So the idea is that when you're doing the realignments, you need to have full responsibility and full power over your being, because if you don't, then you can't do the work. While I kind of say between 18 and 21, I can be a bit sort of cautious in between those age, and I ask a lot of questions, but mind you, I know a couple of 16-year-olds that are absolutely incredible and highly conscious, and they're like 16 going on 30. But then I know some people who are like 21 and they're 21 going on 12. So I mean, everyone is different. I'm not going to put anything in a box. As long as a person is taking full responsibility for their actions and they show that they've got the capacity to make some sort of changes. And I can see that fairly quickly when I tap into a person's soul records, whether they are ready or not, whether they can do it for themselves or not. So, but generally, I do like to work with people from 25 up, just because I find that they're a little bit more ingrained in a bit of a personality. They sort of starting to understand what their role is in the world, and they're more willing to create long-term shifts and long-term changes. And action steps, they have to stick to their homework. And if
Yeah.
they don't do their homework, in essence, like, you can do the clearings, but if you keep doing the same things over and over again, you're going to keep recreating the same patterns over again. So while we've done the job of clearing our past lives and we're suddenly receiving the fullness of our energy again, what's the point? If you're going to keep doing the same things over and over again, then you're not going to create any changes. So that's why it really is a very personal conversation and negotiation between me and the client to see, what would you be willing to do to change this pattern? And they need to be mature enough to be able to do
Exactly. Carla, how can our listeners contact you online?
So I'm virtually everywhere, I think. Patreon is always my absolute first choice. It's www.patreon.com, Carla Savannah.
We'll have links on this podcast as well. Carla Savannah, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really have enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners will love it.
Thank you so much, Rose, for having me on.
I hope you've enjoyed the podcast with the amazing Carla Savannah. If you would like to find any information about her books, her classes, her Patreon, and all her social media, you can find it on her website at carlasavannah.com.au. It's also added onto the description of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time. See you later. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. You can email any questions to info@rosemonarco.com. If you would like to support this podcast, join me on my Patreon at patreon.com/rosemonarco. This helps me to create and produce this for you. My book, An Inside Job, A Practical Guide to Finding Your True Self, can be found on all online stores. You can find me on my website at rosemonarco.com. I'm also on social media, on Instagram as Rose Monarco Official, and you can also find me on Facebook on Rose Monarco Believe the Best is Yet to Come. I look forward to connecting with you next time.